It is Thursday, April 16th, and we are live here on WagerTalk TV. We thank you for joining us for this special NFL Draft edition of the Sports Memo podcast. And joining me from an undisclosed location, a.k.a. her living room in Las Vegas, is the great Kelly Stewart. So, Kelly, how's it going? What's new? Talk to me.
There's not a lot that's new. Just trying to keep a positive outlook on things. That sports are going to return soon. Dana White's putting in work. The PGA says, hey, we're going to try to make this happen in June. So lots to look forward to, and just hope it doesn't get canceled this time.
Yeah, so we got 1 week to the NFL draft. We are starting to hear rumblings of other sports coming back. That's very encouraging. I do believe June is kind of that date where we'll start to see somewhat of a normal environment back in the sports world. No fans, but at least we'll have some games to bet on. But until then, it's all about the NFL draft. And Kelly, it's been a unique situation because there isn't a lot of other things to chew on. And for me, the NFL draft has never been a big piece on my calendar for the betting card, but is obviously taken center stage because of the lack of other sports. I'm hearing the market has been flooded with action, as you would expect. And it's been a very fluid market so far. We've seen a ton of movement, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But to me, the unique part about this, Kel, is just the logistics of this draft. It's all going to be from home. We're going to see Roger Goodell in Bronxville, New York, giving out his picks. My guess is we're going to see a lot of the same issues we have here setting up the Skype calls. We might see some dogs or some kids pop into the background of some of these virtual war rooms. But the logistics is certainly
interesting. It's going
to
be incredible.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be absolutely hilarious because my favorite thing is when, the kids do pop in the background or the dog barks. I mean, I literally have been filming from my home for, let's call it 5 or 6 years now. And so I've kind of developed a strategy. I even have a sign that I hang on my front door so that the UPS man doesn't ring my doorbell so that subsequently my dogs don't start going crazy in the background. So, these other guys aren't used to that kind of stuff. And a lot of them aren't, frankly, used to being at home as much as they've been. I think, you might see a wife pop in. You might see some alcohol. You might see a lot of things where and it's going to be funny. And you're going to see computers crash and you're going to see people. I feel like it's going to be like my fantasy draft that I had to do last year. So everybody knows Prez. Prez is one of the owners of WagerTalk. And Prez at the 11th hour says, we're going to do this fantasy draft with everybody from WagerTalk. And I'm like, no, man, I don't want to do another fantasy draft. I just want to do Johnny Detroit's Big Money League, and that's it. And he's like, you have to be a good sport. Do it for Carmine. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll do it. Sure enough, both drafts get put at the same time. And there I am at the vet office with Coco trying to do both drafts on spotty Wi-Fi, and I just want to break my phone. And of course, I end up with a terrible team. I think I won one game last year, and then I just started trading away everybody and just trying to absolutely ruin the league because I'm a poor sport. But it is funny how those kind of things work because this is now real life.
Yeah.
This is what
isn't
professional sports
draft.
teams have to deal with. They're going to have to deal with shoddy Wi-Fi. They're going to have to deal with distractions. They're going to have to deal with technology not working. It's going to be somewhat, I don't know. I think it's going to be somewhat humanizing. It's going to be nice to see, I think, for a change that these guys have to, have first world problems like the rest of us.
I think certain GMs will be able to handle it better than others. I've seen the draft room, the virtual draft work from home room for Dave Gettleman, and it's not very technologically advanced.
Dave, if you look at Dave Gettleman, we just found out last week, Nick Saban just got an email address. So, I mean, some of these guys are 60 to 75-ish, somewhere in there. I don't know how the oldest coach is, but I would say he's pushing in mid-70s. They better hope they have some help. Maybe they call their grandkids over and was like, hey, can you tell me how to do this? Because you're going to be calling people on Skype. It's going to be a sight to see. The more you point it out, the more I think I'm going to enjoy it.
I think the logistics of it is certainly going to be something that could affect the amount of trades that we see. And it also could affect the amount of aggression we see from these general managers. And when I say that, we've heard a lot from the scouting departments, Kelly, about all right, we have to rely on the tape. So maybe the players at the smaller schools, kind of the high risk, high reward prospects. And again, it might not have an effect in the first round, but in the later rounds of the draft, I could see the SEC, the Big Ten, the ACC getting the majority of those kind of hit or miss prospects later in the draft because the scouts and the GMs just don't have the information. We haven't seen them. We haven't had pro days.
We haven't had pro days that we normally see. A lot of guys elected not to go to the combine.
Yeah,
We saw it with Joe Burrow. So, we know Joe Burrow is going to go number one. We don't even have to debate that. But wouldn't it have been interesting to see if he just didn't even have a pro day? And all of a sudden, here you are expected to go off what you saw in the national championship game and what you saw in his senior season. I mean, I do think, and I feel like I've watched enough practices. I feel like I've watched enough players, especially coming from high school, going to college. Things Athletics don't always work out on the field. I've seen some really talented guys
absolutely.
that drop a ton of passes in big game situations. We've seen guys do great in the combine, and it doesn't carry over to the NFL. We've seen guys do great in college, doesn't carry over to the NFL. So I think that at least, let's put it this way, at least now the GMs, the head coaches are going to have someone to blame for their bad draft picks.
Yeah. So speaking of bad draft picks, we're hearing some interesting news from the quarterback market over the last, I would say, 48 hours. And it's all surrounding Tua Tagovailoa. And in my mind, in my eyes, he's about as can't miss of a quarterback prospect in terms of the grade that we've seen in quite some time. He's even on the same level as Joe Burrow. But what we are hearing doubts about is the medicals. And I think the line moved drastically as sharp as it did away from Tua being a top 3 pick over the last couple days because we heard reports, former GMs come out and say that several teams flunked him medically, Tua. So do you buy any of that stuff right now? Is this something when you're reading kind of the tea leaves of this NFL draft marketplace, do you think GMs may be trying to drive the price down of Tua by releasing this kind of stuff so other teams maybe can hop up and get a steal for Tua?
There is always the question of who is telling the
Mm.
truth. We know that Andy Reid is notoriously a really bad liar. We know, I mean,
He's just
we
so
just know
nice
he's one of
and
those.
big looking. He's like your
Yes,
dad. You don't want to hear.
he's a big teddy
Yeah,
bear, but
exactly.
he lies a lot. And you have to kind of understand why these guys are lying. And you hit the nail on the head with Tua. Are there rumors swirling around so that other people are going, well, wait a minute, you guys flunked him medically. Why? What are we missing? Our doctor didn't flunk him, or whatever it may be. I mean, those are the same questions I have myself
Sure.
about Tua. I also have my questions about Tua's size and Tua's ability to be an NFL quarterback. There are so many of these stud athletic quarterbacks that don't correlate to the NFL. And I think it kind of started, and I'm sure it started before him, but the first one that comes to mind to me is RG3. His hype came out, the Redskins drafted him, and his first year, he came out of the gate running. And he looked great. And you get a couple of those bad hits, and you get an injury, and then you get another injury. And I do think that that is always a concern here. Patrick Mahomes has been able to kind of break away from that. Lamar Jackson, we're going to see if he's able to next year. But Tua is kind of a wild card to me here versus a Joe Burrow, who's a big body. We know he's going to stand in the pocket. We know he's going to be able to take those big hits. Same thing with, a couple of the other guys that are on the docket. Tua is definitely a wild card. So them moving from over 3.5 draft
Mm-hmm.
positions now minus 290 at the sharpest book I saw. That's some big money
Yeah.
moving that man. And honestly, I'm going to be really selfish here and say that I'm very happy because I have the Chargers at plus 450 to draft
Yeah,
Tua.
you got some good
And
movement
so
there.
and so now it's down to plus 145. So if that comes through and cashes, I will be ecstatic. That was more of, I was just kind of looking through who needed what, looking at draft positions, saying, okay, is Miami going to take him? Obviously, we knew Miami was the favorite at 5. Are the Chargers going to take him at 6? Or is Justin Herbert going to go through him or go first? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I'm really excited to watch and see where all these chips
Yeah,
fall.
this draft to me starts with the 3rd pick. I think 1 and 2 are about as locks as you're going to get right now. Obviously, there's probably a bizarro world where Ron Rivera gets a little bit Riverboat Ron.
I keep wondering if he's going to. I talked to my co-host on the Kelly and Murray podcast, John Murray from the Westgate yesterday. He grew up a Redskins fan. He does not want to admit to being one as an adult, and I can understand why. But he said it best. He goes, "If the Redskins can screw it up, they're
they're
gonna
going to
screw it
screw it
up." And
up.
I'm like, Chase Young. Let's see what I have here. He is now almost $9 favorite to be drafted
I'll
under
go
two
out
and a
on a
half
limb. I'll
positions.
say Chase Young goes to the skin. So 3 is really to me where, as a gambler, as someone who's trying to handicap this marketplace, to me 3 is where it starts. I heard a few rumblings, some sharp rumblings, that the Lions might just be stubborn and just take 2 at 3. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I do think the Lions will take a defensive player at 3. And it seems like the risk reward scenario for Tua has pushed the marketplace to a point where the Dolphins aren't willing to trade up for him. They might still take him at 5, but what the lines and what the market's telling me right now, Kelly, is that I just don't think the Dolphins are willing to move up and give up assets to take Tua because of the medicals.
That's the interesting move here. Now, the Lions, we talked about this. The Lions trade their third pick. Yes is now minus 135 on some of the offshore markets. So it's going to be really interesting to see here, because you and I spoke about that earlier in the week. Are the Lions going to trade? Yeah. And there is some interesting dynamic there. We'll see who is available as far as the quarterback position goes when it is Miami's turn. I mean,
Herbert's not going to go before then. I'm almost 100%
I don't think Herbert
confident.
is either, but I do think it would be interesting to see if the Lions took Tua just to have him in their back
Exactly.
pocket.
They could always trade, and I think that's an interesting discrepancy. Make sure you read the fine print of the bet. The Lions could draft Tua and then trade him in an hour, and then you still win your bet of the Lions drafting Tua. And that's why I think if Tua is the best prospect on the board at 3, which I think he is, Jeff Okudah, the O-lineman, those are really solid players, but a franchise quarterback is a franchise quarterback for a reason. The Lions could very well just draft Tua. They're like, all right, well, we're not getting the kind of offers we want in the trade market, and then in a week, trade him because they did get the offer that they liked. So that, to me, is why the Lions at plus 750, which is the number I saw, to draft Tua, that could be worth a little sprinkle there.
This Detroit team, I really respect Matt Patricia a lot, obviously given his coaching tenure, but there's been a few things that have always kind of thrown me off about this Lions team. Okay. And I could see them doing something really screwy here.
Yeah, exactly.
And really
the question is here, and this is the question that I think is worth answering, and this might direct you into the answer. To me, Jeff Okudah is a good corner. These offensive linemen are can't miss, but is Jeff Okudah really worth a top 5 pick? Is he a top 3 player? Even though every projection is having him go to the Lions at 3, does that make sense from like a team standpoint? I mean, I know they have a need at corner.
Every once in a while, we see a team, specifically the last time I can remember off the top of my head was the Chiefs drafted Eric Fisher, number 1 overall. I do think this first round, and now obviously I'm not a GM, I'm not a head coach, you have to get key players. The reason why Chase Young is going to go to Washington, even though they need a lot of other players, is he will immediately help out that defense. You need someone who is going to immediately help out your team when you're taking them in the first round. Otherwise, in my opinion, they're not a first-round pick. Do I think Okudah is a first-round pick? Yeah. But a top 3 pick?
Exactly. You're basically saying that you're giving him the keys to the cornerback position on your franchise. I think you can say that about Joe Burrow, giving him the keys to the quarterback position in Cincinnati. You could say the same thing about Chase Young being the generational pass rushing talent for the Redskins for the next 5 to 10 years. I don't know if you could say that about Jeff Okudah. There's some that say C.J. Henderson is the better cover corner in this draft, and I think his number at 12.5 is certainly interesting. The Giants, to me, I would be shocked if they don't take an offensive lineman. I pounded that one hard. I got it at even money. It's down to minus 200
You text me that one earlier in the week. So I got Jedrick Willis, which is who you also like, plus 495 to be drafted by the Giants. Now, obviously, there's other guys that have better odds, and the reason why is because that's more likely who the Giants are going to take. But I think out on the limit, almost 5-1, Jedrick Willis as an offensive tackle. The Giants have got to fix their offensive line issues. They have to. So, like I just spoke about,
the pick of the litter.
In this draft, they have to take the best O-lineman. They have got to have somebody step up here and really be able to protect whoever the hell is going to be their quarterback for the next 5 years, because I don't even think they can make a decision on what's really going to happen here. I mean, obviously, they've got some issues. We know the Giants have some issues. I'm not going to beat that dead horse.
The Giants have some issues. So Jedrick Willis here on the East Coast, if FanDuel, it was plus 450 yesterday that I got Willis at, and today it's plus 250. So that story yesterday that came out that the Giants running back coach is an former Alabama coach, and obviously Jedrick Wills, former Alabama offensive tackle. So there's a connection there, and there was a little bit of a bridge that was connected those two. So that's moved, and now, and again, if you were on the right side of that move, now you can come back and you can bet Wirfs at like plus 200, plus 250. And as long as they take one of those guys, you will be profitable. So the quarterback market's certainly interesting. Herbert, I think the Chargers or Dolphins. I'd be shocked if it's not one of those teams. Tua, best guess. The Lions are certainly at play at 3. Obviously, the Dolphins are in play at 5, and the Chargers are in play at 6. The other
Here's
quarterback.
my question
Go ahead.
with real quick with what in regards to Herbert and why I think he'll go to the Dolphins is because I do think that he and Fitzpatrick, I think the Dolphins have kind of said, hey, listen, we're going to stick with Fitzpatrick for a while and kind of do that Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers thing where you obviously we know Fitzpatrick is not Brett Favre. Sorry, but you get my idea. The Tom Brady, Jimmy G thing where we stick with what's working or working well enough. And now you're the protege because especially with Herbert, I think Herbert's draft stock really kind of was his highest his junior year.
Yeah. Oh, I
think
agree.
If he would have entered the draft, it definitely dropped.
Rose Bowl
right?
helped. The Rose Bowl helped, but there's nothing special to me about Herbert, Kelly. To me, that's the difference. Tua, I see that special moxie that Herbert's
he definitely has the moxie. He definitely has the attitude. Yes, but what have we seen in the NFL? I know what we're starting to go to, but you have those old school coaches that refuse to have these guys, and I'm just curious as to why Josh Rosen is going to now be. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it. As a K-State fan, I watched UCLA. Josh Rosen sat on the bench so he could go to the draft. The line went crazy. Didn't matter. K-State won and covered. But I was like, why isn't he playing in the bowl game? And then he doesn't even play for the Cardinals barely. Now he's in Miami. Do they really need another statuesque dumb white quarterback?
I have no idea. So we get to a certain point with this quarterback market, and it gets very intriguing because once we get past Herbert, we have Jordan Love. And I've heard rumblings about Jordan Love. His number right now, right around 19.5. I think the Patriots at 23 are certainly in play. We've heard the Jaguars don't want to take a quarterback in this draft. They are happy with Gardner Minshew. The Jags picked twice. They picked 9th. They picked 20th. That would have been a potential landing spot for Jordan Love as well. I'm hearing the Raiders are interested in taking a quarterback as well. They also have 2 picks in the first round, 12 and 19. That's the pick they got from Chicago in the Khalil Mack trade. So the Raiders, I think, are a possibility at 19 to take Love. I think the Patriots at 23.5. Where do you handicap Jordan Love with his number right now?
I have almost no notes on Jordan Love. He is so far down my spectrum that I really don't know if the Raiders need a quarterback.
Okay.
I really don't. I'm not sure what we're going to see. I think we're going to see a battle with Mariota and Carr, obviously, come football season. And I think that they have to be okay with that. I don't see the purpose. They need to address, frankly, first and foremost, their wide receiver issues.
Yeah, well, so I can see them taking a wide receiver with their first pick.
At 13, right? Yeah. So they're going to take a wide receiver at 13. Are they going to come back and take a quarterback? They have to fill a couple of holes on that defensive side of the ball. They need to fix some O-line issues. I don't know where Jordan Love fits in. Jordan Love has shown a lot of promise.
I agree.
I do think playing at Utah State, obviously, at some of these smaller schools. I mean, look at Tom Brady. He didn't get drafted to the 6th round, and he played at Michigan. And he turned out to be one of the Patriots' best of all time. Best quarterbacks of all time. But Jordan Love, I mean, I could see him going to a New England or to a big name NFL team that wants him to sit on the bench, and he has the coach to kind of teach him what he needs to do. And who's better than that than Belichick? So we'll see. We'll see where he kind of ends up. I mean, obviously, I do think he will get drafted in the first round.
Yeah, he's a first rounder.
I do think he's a first rounder. I just don't know if you don't address your quarterback issues early, at what point do you say, okay, we're going to take this guy and take a shot on him? Or at that point in time in the first round, you still have so many great offensive linemen left. You have so many great defensive players left. It gets very dicey and to when to decide, okay, cool, I already have 3 quarterbacks on my bench. Am I going to add a 4?
Yeah, I'm pretty neutral on Love. I think the 19.5 number is a fair number. I would probably stay away from it. I didn't see a ton of value on either side. The wide receivers, we got a couple wide receiver questions in the chat. Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs. Those are the top 3 names. The deep dive that I did on the wide receivers over the last few years, the first round wide receivers, Kelly, is I would say about half of them have been busts. And I would say the class of 2017, the one with Josh Doxson and Laquan Treadwell. I mean, so there's a decent chance that out of those three names, Judy, Lamb, Ruggs, one, if not two of them are busts. So at 12.5 with Judy and Lamb, I think those are fair prices. What do you think's the first one off the board?
I'm looking at this and I feel like there's a three-way tie for different reasons between Judy, Ruggs, and Lamb. So a couple of weeks ago, we bet Ruggs at 5-1. We bet him again at 4-1. He's now plus 350 at most spots. So I'm very happy with the number I got there, thinking that he might be a good fit for either the Raiders, San Francisco, the Jets, Denver. We're going to see who ends up taking someone first. I mean, we know Cleveland can always use a nice wide receiver. Of course, the Giants could use a wide receiver, but are they going to take one? Probably not. No. Obviously, Judy's the favorite. We heard his name a million times last year. We also heard CeeDee Lamb. The difference is CeeDee Lamb went to Oklahoma. And what is the perception of the Big 12? Well, they don't play defense. Nope. So, of course, his numbers are inflated, right? But I think it's a little unfair to CeeDee Lamb, but I do think that the public perception is there, which also means that it might be the coaches and the GM's perception. So I've kind of crossed Lamb like off the list. I do think that he is there. He is present. He's going to get drafted in the first round. The question is why and where is he going to go? So I kind of narrowed it down between Judy and Ruggs. I do think we still have Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson. And we got I've heard good things about Baylor, Denzel Mims from Baylor. He's climbed up the boards.
Mims is great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I do think we could see those guys go to these same teams. It just all kind of depends on where the fit is and who has the need. We know that Denver absolutely needs a stud wide receiver. We know that San Francisco just got rid of Emmanuel Sanders, and they've got to fill that void.
They also have two first-round picks, the Niners. They have 13 and 31.
So, they're going to have to fill in these voids, and it depends on I always feel this way, and maybe it is the K-State girl in me, that you can get these lower tiered guys, the Jordy Nelsons of the world, that are willing to outwork some of these guys who have basically been a starter since 9th grade, right? Yeah. And you get this work ethic, and certain coaches want those type of players because they know that they're not going to get a headache with them. They know that you're not going to get the attitude. I personally haven't heard anything bad about any of these wide receivers.
No, they've been great. The one prop I know you like is the amount of wide receivers taken in the first round. And we've seen it at 5.5. I've seen numbers even as high as 6.5. But you got a good number there at 5. I think 6 is almost a certainty. 5 is an absolute mortal lock. There's going to be 5 in the first round.
5.5 minus 250 is what it is currently right now. I see 6, if not 7 wide receivers going in the first round. So I did bet the over there. Now, again, I didn't love it. And also remember, we're kind of being limited here on what the availability to bet is. I know we'll talk about it a little bit about the liquidity of the market and what you've heard from bookmakers, what I've heard from bookmakers. So just know that this is not normal that I'm laying over $1.50 on any of these, but we're in special times, and so I'm making special concessions in some of my bets, and plus at minus 250, so you're laying $5 to win 200. It's just where I'm at. That's what
$5 bills, hard time. 5 large, and it's funny you mentioned that because the two of us are kind of in the same vein. We like finding big numbers. We like finding the dogs, and we like, getting that closing line value. That's how I consider myself making a successful bet or not. Obviously, we want the bet to win, but to me, if I beat the closing line by 50%, meaning it goes from 450 to 250, then I feel like I made a good bet, even if it doesn't.
I mean, if Tua doesn't go to the Chargers, you're right. There is some little concession in my heart that says I got the best of the number, but nothing compares to actually being able to
cashing it. But that being said, those highly juiced bets that are minus 250, even the ones that are minus 400, I'm seeing the Falcons to take a defensive player at minus 400. Yeah, it sounds like we're swallowing crazy juice in this crazy world where something we would never do with our gambling styles. But in this particular instance, because there's so less variables to have to work through, the minus 400 to me is much safer than taking a minus 400 for a 14-point favorite on Saturday.
And that's kind of what I've told people before is like, listen, if you can find value in the percentage of, okay, listen, it is almost 100% that Chase Young is going to go to the Redskins. And you laid, what, $3 initially?
The implied odds of that is only about 75%.
Exactly. So the idea there, early on. That's why I wanted to get some of these locked in, and we're going to see them continue to move.
Yeah.
I mean, we
The
have, I
next
know
week.
that probably the public is still betting these earlier than they normally would, but they're not heavily involved. When I spoke with John Murray, he said, listen, for years, this was a very sharp market.
Yes.
That was it. The sharp guys came in every once in a while. People would want to bet for their team or their favorite player, whatever it may be. But this was a very sharp market. Well, because there is Belarus soccer, Nicaraguan soccer, Russian table tennis. This is the competition for the draft. This draft handle is going to be monstrous. Yep. So we're going to see things move. If you missed a number, I'm going to give the advice of don't try to chase it now. Maybe hang tight. We may see some of these come back. And
I think Tua comes back. I'd be willing to bet Tua comes back to earth a little bit.
I could see that. And I also could see, some of these other numbers of where Tua goes.
Yeah.
The number of
watch the Lions line. I'm telling you, bookmark the Lions at plus 750. I would be willing to bet a couple of shiny nickels that on draft night it's not plus 750 for him to go to the Lions. It's somewhere like plus 500 or plus 400. I don't know why, but that when John Sheeran, the FanDuel sportsbook director, was telling me that was the play that had the books the most exposed, was him going to the Lions. My eyes were like, I hadn't heard one nugget from anywhere about the Lions taking Tua. And then when you think about it from a logistical standpoint, they're going to get all these calls for trades. It's going to be a weird situation. It's going to be virtual draft. War rooms are going to get all maybe they just say, you know what, screw it. We're going to take this guy. And then we're going to let the chips fall as they may down the road when we're not under the gun to make this trade under that 10-minute time window. That's when all of a sudden I was like, man, I could see a scenario where the Lions just say, screw it. We're just going to take this guy.
And that's fine. I can see that scenario too. But at this point in time, if they're not prepared for the number 3 pick, it's just like a fantasy draft.
It could be a very panicky draft.
Minutes,
it could be.
If you take all 10 minutes, you should know, because you already know who's going number 1. You basically know who's going number 2. The Lions essentially have the very first pick.
I agree. This draft starts.
So they don't know who they're taking already, which kind of makes me wonder if somebody got some good inside information, and maybe that's why they're very unloaded on the Lions.
They haven't moved it at all, Kelly. That's the fishier part about it, is if all of a sudden they steam the Lions down to like plus 3, like $3 or $4 from like $8, people take notice to that. Nobody takes notice if you don't move it.
I have a Not in Vegas account that has the Lions at 10-1. They have the Dolphins minus 135 and the Chargers plus 145.
10-1's very juicy. That's very
10-1 is interesting. Redskins up to 9-1.
I like. And again, there's going to be moments in this draft where you scratch your head. We see that every year. Mel Kiper was preaching for weeks last year that Dwayne Haskins was going to get taken in front of Daniel Jones. That was the big, hold up with the quarterbacks last season. And obviously it was Jones getting reached for at 6. So nothing surprises me with quarterbacks on draft night. I think GMs would be the most willing to be aggressive with the quarterback on draft night. And Tua is such a polarizing figure, especially because the Dolphins made this same mistake 10 years ago when they decided to pass on Drew Brees for Dante Culpepper.
You got to bring up the old painful stuff for those guys, huh? I mean, the great thing about this is hindsight's always 20/20. Of course. We can name a ton of really great, really athletic quarterbacks that either got in trouble, Michael Vick, got injured, RG3. I mean, there are so many guys that you can't predict the future, and that's the uncertainty here of what's going to happen. And I think that's why we do see these rookie contracts are smaller, and we do see these things that as they progress, I guess I'm different, but I hated Drew Brees in college and before I went to college because the 1998 Alamo Bowl.
Oh yeah, I heard about this. I've heard about this.
Lit up Kansas State in the biggest letdown spot ever for the Wildcats. And had I been a gambling woman back then, I would have bet my house on the Boilermakers. So I will say that looking at it from that perspective, yes, I would have taken Drew Brees. But just on the names alone, based on the college stats alone, Dante Culpepper was an absolute stud.
He was.
He had all of the promise in the world. So I can understand why they chose it.
The irony is that I compared to like a left-handed Drew Brees. I saw a question in the chat: how many running backs drafted in the first round? Basically, it's a yes, no. Basically, it's a yes, no. Those are the lines I've seen. Will a running back get taken? Yes is like minus 200. I'm on the no at plus 200. There might be a little discrepancy with the odds there,
Yeah,
depending on
plus
what
I'm seeing plus 180 right now.
I would say if you get it anywhere plus 175 or higher, I think that's a solid bet. We've seen Swift and Taylor as the two guys talked about, but to me, running backs are not going to be highly valued in this draft.
And they shouldn't be highly valued. Listen, Le'Veon Bell ruined it for everyone. He ruined it for everyone. Sitting out saying, I need this big contract. Todd Gurley almost ruined it for everyone, except he's not as big of a jackass. So you get these guys, they get paid, then all of a sudden what happens? Their progression goes down. We have seen that walk-on college running backs are now starting in the NFL. Yeah. I'm looking at you, Denver Broncos, not anymore because they have Melvin Gordon, but like a year and a half ago, you know what I mean? They're just plugging and playing these big body guys that can pound out 3.5 yards here, 2 yards there, get them that first down. These workhorse guys. The NFL is, I think, starting to progress away. They're starting to enjoy the Patrick Mahomes 50-yard bomb downfield into the end zone of Tyreek Hill. The days of this running back, Darren Sproles was always an exciting running back for me to watch back in the day because he was so small. And here's all these big old linemen in the NFL, and then boom, he just like pops
Maurice
out.
Jones-Drew. Well, to me, that actually is why this Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU is such an intriguing prospect, because all this guy does is scoot out of the backfield and catch passes, and everybody's been talking about Burrow and Jefferson and even the guys that LSU has coming back, Lamar Chase. No one was really talking about Edwards-Helaire. If you slot this guy, and you know, he's not a guy that's going to go in the first round, probably not even the second round, but if you slot this guy onto a team like the Packers or the Saints where they've already got a good offense in place, all of a sudden he becomes Darren Sproles.
And listen, that's where I think we're seeing the progression of the game going. Yeah. You just mentioned the Packers, and it reminded me of Eddie Lacy, who gained like 50 pounds during the offseason. Like, that's what I mean. Man. These running backs, these running backs are ruining it for one another. Do I think Taylor is an absolute stud?
Sure.
Yes. Would I waste the money to draft him in the first round? Waste the pick? I don't think I would. I like that you're under half a running back to go. I got plus 180 last night.
Love it.
I'm gonna side with you there because, again, like I said, I just have to play on that same premise that I don't think the value is there. That's there with one of a great defensive player.
You're betting
in the
a macro
first
trend.
You're
getting 2-to-1 for your money for macro trends in the NFL, which is less of an example of running backs, more of an example of wide receivers. And also a number I like as well is the offensive tackles in this draft. And I think that's, it's not a very sexy pick, but when you go O-tackle in this specific draft, I think there is a ton to choose from. There's 4 in the top 10, and then there's several others. Jackson out of USC, and I heard that this Josh Jones kid from Houston who had a great Senior Bowl is also definitely going to go in the first round. Ezra Cleveland from Boise State, definitely a first-round grade. That's 7 right there. I'm seeing the number at 6.5. To me, that's
over minus 130.
That's an unheralded pick. Not a lot of people are going to be talking about O-linemen, but this is as deep as this draft is for wide receivers, I think it's even deeper for offensive tackles.
So you mentioned how many offensive linemen are going to be drafted in the first round. Listen, we can go through, we can look at all of the mock drafts. You put together a nice mock draft yourself that you shared with Minty and I, and I think you're right. I think, to me, going back on the running back thing, going back on a couple of other key players, you've got to be able to protect your quarterback. Offensive linemen, I'm looking just in the first round, is a big need for at least 14 teams.
Absolutely. I think it's a need for every team. I think just like having a quarterback, every team needs
correct. One. Right. Every team needs a stud. Every team needs someone that they can plug in their first year. We saw the Broncos do it with Dalton Reisner. As I mentioned, we saw Eric Fisher with the Chiefs. And though they didn't have outstanding first years, and you hear the fan bases complain, those guys are only going to get bigger, better, and stronger. They're still, Eric's older now, but Dalton, for example, is only 24 years old. I mean, some of these guys still have years to progress to be absolutely outstanding linemen. And I think personally, those are the kind of players that you get the biggest bang for your buck. These guys, they're not getting those big quarterback contracts. They're not getting those big wide receiver contracts. They're the guys in the trenches protecting your investments.
Arizona, Cleveland, Tampa Bay, New York Giants, New York Jets, those are all teams in the top 14 that all have immediate needs at offensive tackle. I think all 4 of those big name offensive tackles are gone before we get past the Bucs at 14. I'm also hearing the Bucs could be a very intriguing trade candidate to move up if they think one of these tackles isn't going to be there. They've got Tom Brady, who's not very mobile. Tom Brady staying upright, in my opinion, is the only thing that matters for the Tampa Bay Bucs' success this season.
And I was getting ready to say, I mentioned Kansas City. I'm going to mention them again. They need to have a better O-line this year. We saw Patrick get laid out a little bit more than we did.
And he had an injury for the first time in his career where he missed significant time.
Credit to some of the defensive coordinators on the opposing teams, obviously trying to figure out ways to get to him. But that just means Kansas City's got to plug and play. We've got to see Miami address those issues as well, just because I don't know who's going to be their quarterback, but let's just say it is Tua. You're going to have to protect Tua. You're going to absolutely have to with those health injuries. I think, honestly, Seattle's got to work on it. Russell Wilson was running for his life a lot last year. And
Seattle's
going
to take an offensive tackle at 27, I think. I do.
And they probably will. And Baltimore is going to have to protect Lamar Jackson.
Good point.
That line gives him the ability to have those breakout runs, gives him that ability to come out of the pocket and to be able to make some of those great throws. And the fact that they have that extra half a second and a half, because those O-linemen are so big and strong, is going to be huge. I think the more I'm looking at this, I got to figure out where I can bet more money on how many offensive linemen are going to be drafted in the first round. Like I said, I just laid 130 over 6.5. I'm going to see if I can find some more when we get done with this call.
So to finish up, a couple of the interesting props that you sent me that I want to get to, and you can tell me which is your favorite of the two for us to digest. Jalen Hurts drafted in the 3rd round, or wide receiver drafted in the top 10. Both are plus money. Which one do you think you like better for our audience out there?
So it's tough. I went back and forth, but I do want to touch on what we talked about with Jalen Hurts last night, as well as Jake Fromm, just because we found some discrepancies in the marketplace. But I do think that if you're going to make me pick which one I like, I do think Jalen Hurts is going to be a 3rd round pick. Okay. I bet him plus 150. I know we're hearing he's going to go in the 2nd round. This is actually funny because Cabby, who I work with over at Bleacher Report, and I were battling back and forth in October, doing my usual trash talk. And he goes, Kelly, he's going to be a 1st round pick. And I'm like, no, he's not. And doesn't look like he's going to be a 1st round pick. I don't think he's going to be a 2nd round pick. But the number is 65 and a half is what I'm seeing. I'm not sure which is very close. As I mentioned, I bet him plus 150 to go in the 3rd round. I do think that I really like that bet. I mean, my favorite bet probably is Tua to the Chargers, but that's only because, like you said,
that's because you got the CLV. You got the closing line value. You got the CLV. Jake Fromm, you mentioned. So East Coast, West Coast. We talk about the bias. You and I live on opposite coasts. So, it's very interesting. Fromm at FanDuel, 57.5. Circa 74.5 for his draft position. That's a monster difference.
All of you guys that aren't following along on Twitter, Circa actually now has the ability to fund your account. Well, I lost my ass on the national championship game, and I didn't get a chance to go back downtown and refund my account. So I was, texting with them. They're like, "Don't worry." So I finally opened up my Circa app, and they've got a ton of different discrepancies, even from books here in Vegas, which is really exciting to see. But we're talking almost 20 draft positions between Jake Fromm here in Vegas and on the East Coast. I think we have a nice middle opportunity, Jared. I'm going to bet the under 74.5. You're going to bet the over 75.5. And we're just going to hang tight and see if you and I can middle this bet, because
I think we can.
There are a ton of opportunities for people to be able to do this. And I think it's absolutely incredible. And then one of the other ones, since we're on the topic of quarterbacks, will quarterbacks be drafted back to back? Yes, plus 135.
I like that one too. Yeah, I like that one too.
I tagged that one last night at Circa as well. So that one's
I haven't seen that on any other book, and I've looked at a bunch of them.
And that's what I mean. The fact that some of these places have different offerings.
I think that's a sign of the times. That's a sign of the times.
It is a sign of the times, and because they're wanting to get – if everybody had the same, you're just going to, in a perfect world, bet whoever has the best number.
It's also created a lot of discrepancies with the correlation in certain markets. I noticed it on the East Coast books. The Giants to draft an offensive lineman was favored, but then the first player on the board for the Giants was Isaiah Simmons. So you get these weird discrepancies where if you think you can outsmart the market, you can get your place in line a lot faster.
I do agree with that, but this is what I'm looking for is where we can win both bets because unfortunately you can't win.
That's
You
true.
can't win
That's
both of
true.
those bets,
That's true.
though you
You
can
got to
get both
figure
of
out
them
which
plus
one's priced
money.
wrong. You have to figure out which one's
Well,
priced wrong.
if you can figure out how to arbitrage
Yeah.
it, you can still make a profit. But I'm getting greedy here on this Jake
You
Fromm one
are.
and hoping that
Well,
we
our
can
eyes
go.
lit up last night. We had that little
I
emoji
do
with the dollar signs in the eyes last night.
I do think that there are going to be some other things out there. If you guys see any, feel free to tweet me. Let me know.
Absolutely.
I'll let you know what we have here in Vegas and see if we can definitely, hit some of those bets where normally that doesn't happen. This doesn't happen. I can't get a 7.5 with the Giants on NFL Sunday and a 3.5 in Vegas. Like that doesn't
Exactly.
happen. You're not
That's
finding
what we're
these middles.
comparing
These
it to.
middles they're so far
It
and few
is.
between
It is.
that right now it was very shocking to see some of these discrepancies. So if you guys see any awesome ones, please definitely tweet and I'll put these out there as well. But as far as quarterbacks go, that's pretty much all I've got there.
Yeah.
I mean, I did my damage on talking trash about the running backs, and we know where Chase Young's going.
David Chan says scalping draft bets the new normal during a pandemic. That's everything's a new normal. You've got Kelly's Twitter handle there at the bottom of the screen, so be sure to tweet her if you have any of these picks. We've got 1 week to the NFL draft, Kelly. I know that we're at this point now where we're hungry for basically anything sports. My guess is this is the most watched sporting event of the year, I think.
Yes, but outside of the Super Bowl,
Super Bowl's next year, though. In next year, 2021.
Well, no, I meant in February.
In February.
You mean
that's true.
March?
That's a good point. That is a good point.
Okay,
I
thought you meant
this
like
is gonna
2020.
be. I think this is gonna be kind of up to. I think this is gonna be close
Super
to
Bowl-esque.
like over 100 million people in this country. I think are gonna watch.
We should tell them to have a halftime show, and so that everybody's tunes in.
Well, there's gonna be a telethon for COVID-19, which I think is good. It's
didn't
going to be
know
like
that.
a running charity that they'll and we talked about this last night too. We do think there's going to be some kind of charity with the players taking salaries and donating. I mean, there's going to be a lot of COVID-19 related things. But that's all we've got for this draft prop special edition Sports Memo podcast. It's certainly been fun. Kelly, thanks for taking the time. And I'm sure we're going to continue to talk about this over the next week. But so far, the marketplace has been really interesting.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on, Jared.
All right. Bye, guys. Enjoy the day.